So we're going to talk about some authoritarian states, such as Nazi Germany and Cambodia underneath the Khmer Rouge. An authoritarian state is a form of government where a single leader or a group of elite control the political freedoms of a country. These groups control the laws enforced and suppress political competition. These groups also control freedom of speech and fill the press and news with propaganda serving their political goal. Nazi Germany fits the description of an authoritarian state perfectly. Under the rule of Adolf Hitler, with centralized power of Germany, through oppression, Adolf Hitler gained control of German society. They would arrest anyone who opposed Hitler's rule and often tortured and killed. Often, Nazis would also spread propaganda through newspapers, posters, movies, and even the radio, where many received their information, allowing the Nazis to control and censor information given to the German citizens. They would arrest anyone who opposed Hitler's rule and often tortured and killed. Important groups in Nazi Germany, such as the Gestapo or secret police, and the SS, the paramilitary organization, which were directly involved in the Holocaust, which resulted in the death of millions of Jews and those who sympathized with them. Nazis would force labor onto workers. They targeted other groups such as disabled people and members of the LGBTQ community. In Germany, these groups would also use displays of violence to oppress and cause fear to prevent an uprising against Hitler. Another authoritarian state was Cambodia when the country was under control of the Khmer Rouge. In Cambodia, the Khmer Rouge, led by Pol Pot, ruled Cambodia and carried out his authoritarian regime as he sought to create a radical communist society by abolishing institutions, attacking the perceived enemies, and enforcing totalitarian control. The Khmer Rouge targeted intellectuals, ethnic minorities, religious groups, and anyone who they thought would pose a threat to their ideology. The Khmer Rouge went after schools, hospitals, and markets as well. After seizing and dismantling Cambodian government institutions, the Khmer Rouge renamed Cambodia to the Democratic Kampuchea. Cities and urban areas were evacuated and citizens were forced into farms and labor camps under harsh conditions. They imposed the rule by cutting Cambodia off from the rest of the world with strict control over communications and movements. Just like Nazi Germany, they also pushed out propaganda, cause fear, and enforce obedience upon citizens. Alright, so I'm going to go a little more in depth on what Nazi Germany did to spread some propaganda. Obviously, we know they did some media control, meaning that they just had control over the radios, newspapers. They would post posters everywhere, control the cinema, like movies, and so that just means for us, if they were to control the cinema, they would control movies and TV shows, and that's basically what they did for them too. So all the media that the German people were absorbing at the time was just Nazi shit stuff, Nazi stuff. There was a movie called Triumph of the Will, uh, and it glorified the Nazi Party and its allies, portraying Hitler as some heroic figure. So there's that for, cinema and posters. They would have these crazy looking German things where Hitler would be a prominent figure in it, or they would have slogans all over it, and they would just reinforce the message of loyalty towards the leader. They would also spread xenophobic and anti-Semitic ideas through these posters, just to try to persuade the German people a little bit more. Newspapers were controlled by the Nazis as well, um, so they would just shut down anything that was against them. There was no independent press outlets, I guess, just because they were taken under control by Hitler and his regime. They would all make sure that there was one narrative that all of these media outlets were portraying. So there wasn't really a couple different things here and there that were being said that were not the same. No, it was all the same stuff that they were all trying to really push out and convince people of. And in Germany at the time, if you were to go against this and take it to court or go against Hitler anyway, spread anti-propaganda, post your own posters, release your own films, do anything on the radio, anything like that would result in torture or death. Even if you were to take it to court, like we've seen that one movie, but it's also like about real life that we watched. We saw that they people did take it to court. That woman and her brother and her, I think, partner or something like that. They took it to court and they were executed because of that, and they never received justice. Um, it's way past, I guess, statute of limitations or whatever from like now, but like even back then, immediately after, like after the following years where Hitler was like stripped of power and he died because he killed himself, they didn't receive that family did not receive justice for anything that happened. That was the case for many Jews at the time, many people who were against the Nazi party. They never received anything to like make up for all the losses that they received. Okay, and for Cambodia, they also did a lot of very similar things involving propaganda and, totalitarian power and control. They had very like strong communist ideas. So they basically like wanted a classless society where they would abolish all private property, money, and like social hierarchies. And yeah, the propaganda was framed like as a path to liberate Cambodians from exploitation, to make it seem like they were actually being freed from all this. And so the Khmer Rouge would try to glorify rural life, making it seem as if like being a normal worker or like a peasant, as one may say, would be like ideal living for them. And they would not want anyone to be like an intellectual or like someone who lived like in an urban area. Like they were strictly against that type of stuff. They really hated education. Like they wanted everyone to be uneducated to like avoid some sort of uprising. So schools were closed. There was no sort of like traditional education system. They were replaced with like political things to like better suit the Khmer Rouge. They used a lot of children, like they just exploited children a lot for revolutionary brigades. So pretty not cool. They used a lot of fear and isolation to control the masses, and so they would use like violent demonstrations, like such as like Nazi Germany. Um, but they would also like they would use that along with like isolating them completely from the rest of the world. So like all radio broadcasts, all news outlets, everything that you could really think of, they controlled and prevented the Cambodian citizens from like interacting with the rest of the world. So while all this was happening, they were under the assumption that it was pretty much like normal. Well, they didn't like it. No one liked this part, obviously, but they had nothing else to like base it off of because they were stuck in this like control for such a long time. So it made it a lot harder for them to like break free and like spread like what was happening in the country. So newspapers, pamphlets, and all these things were like filled with the same thing and would like basically like denounce all external influences and only like talk about internal things and like internal enemies to make like the citizens kind of just who obey the Khmer Rouge. So they would try to turn them against their own like their traditional government and just like have them not listen to them, to only listen to the Khmer Rouge. They would use a lot of symbolic stuff as well, like simple repetitive messages just to like really secure a spot in your brain so that it was constantly just in your head that you should like listen to them and obey. These are a lot of censorship in books and media that would otherwise like counter their personal narrative, their political narrative. And of course, like I mentioned already, these are a lot of violent things to cause terror, such as like public executions, purges, forced confessions. So when people were not innocent or were not guilty of a charge, they would force them to, like own up to something that they did not do, uh, just to have someone to blame for a specific set of things, just like anything. They would just have one fall guy or many fall guys just to do it. And yeah, it would just force people into like silence or whatever and reinforce the like consequences of opposing the regime. So like if you were to go against them, it would most likely just result in death. And you know, it just was not very it was not a very good thing for the Cambodian people. But with that being said, that wraps up pretty much my presentation here. I'm at like 10 minutes 30. I feel like it's a pretty good length. So yeah, bye.